Media test. Media test. Oh, yes. It's not cool anymore, though. Deep voices.
Yes, they are.
No, it's all about nerdy podcasting voices now.
That's a temporary thing.
As someone with a deep voice, I appreciate it.
Test 1, 2.
Good morning, everybody. I was just doing that with my phone there just to not only get attention, but to show you what your phone does. In other words, if your phone is not turned off or put on silence or vibrate, if you could just put it on silent right now, take that time just to look at it too. I thought mine was on silent too, and then I just realized. So, because it's important that it's on silent, sometimes when somebody's right in the middle of a thought and their phone might go off, it might affect the testimony or affects the people here. So everybody please at this time bring out your phone and just check your phones to see, make sure that your phone is off, totally off. A few announcements before we start. Waltus, they'll be doing Waltus at lunch in the family room. So Waltus games at lunchtime in the family room. And the family room is located 2 rooms over. Also today we have an RN on staff, Lindsay Sylvester, please stand. Lindsay, just to let everybody know that we have an RN here today. I myself is also trained in first aid and is a first aid instructor for the community. So if you need help, I'm going to send you to Lindsay. That's what we teach at first aid. I'll patch you up if I have to, but you're going to see Lindsay. So just remind everybody else too that we have an RN on staff here today, and anybody needs help. Also, Gojawa will be just before dinner in Glooscap B. In Glooscap B, they'll be doing some Gojawa dancing. Those unfamiliar with the Gojawa, the Mohawk kind of do a smoke dance. We do a Gojawa, and I think our settler friends, they do square dancing, but not to be confused. There'll be no square dancing allowed here. It's a $500 fine. Just putting that out there now, or a donation to the Heritage Park. So Gojawa, an old traditional dance, will be held just before dinner tonight in Glooscap B. Once again, that's next door. This is Glooscap A. Also, too, there'll be a second public hearing space today in the Janu room, which means giant, Janu. And that's the Janu room is downstairs. So when you come in the main entrance, there's the big room there to the right. That's the Janu room. So please feel free to sit in on those hearings too as well. So this is a public hearing as well as the other one. And then there's a lot of private sessions too. So be careful where you walk in, and always ask where you're going around, and we will direct you. We have many people with sashes. We could have some of the red sashes, please stand up. And these are the red Power Rangers. No. The health support. We have the purple. Oh, I'm sorry. The Mi'kmaq Leaders Network. Yes. And we also have the purple sashes, which is the mental health. And then you have the blue sashes, and that's the elders. I just got a blue shirt on today. So. And we do the ceremonies and help people too as well. So, and we're located all the way through the building. So those are our morning announcements, and we just want to let everybody know what's going on. At this time, we're going to start, and we're going to always start. In every ceremony we start with an opening prayer. So it's very important that we acknowledge the Spirit and why we are here. And we're going to invite the spirits in to help us today with our healing, but also in telling our story. So with that, I want to invite our elder here, Katie McEwen, also known as Auntie Katie, to Canada. And she's going to start with an opening prayer. And also Lottie Johnson is going to help as well.
Anu ala sod maan. Kiso tan kwen no do chus nekto a tan kamula modem. Ikene mat mi mat wokon no doi. Eli gileiman. Keti si dan teli up Jason sod wokon. Tan tedu te mananai. nuda gilgamo gignodem aksadu woganam. Edawi gisi mlegan tet pagorekto. Edawi gisi yapchi namian megwasit wakwasi edaguset. Edawi npidin morgi keb midedman tantesek gisi daganam. Tebine das dagana nudolin tantojo gelolin. Eda moldebia sedu woganam. Ignamuin ulaman nsettes tantesek gisi ginamas kanijing tantesek Elligadun ginamad newe tes nibi akundo. Eda molgi gnewalin. Mbuti najiganan ahanchiganam kado auna wisiwiginaman ta mawi maskelmit nanin. Eda mol yapchi ilajolin. Ulaman kedwidlek kiskajedes kisian kamolin puk ted pahayo pukuk. Tanto kayayan mantago konmek tijakamis tanto jo iga miamos lien amen na liach.
Thank you. Also, too, we have something that's been added to our blanket here today, and I'm going to ask our elder Lottie Johnson to explain this and to share some words.
Good morning and welcome. I wasn't quite sure exactly what year that we started with this, but it came from our journey of healing with the residential school survivors. And our first teepee that we put up was in Eskasoni, and was with the help of Katie, Lawrence, Diane Longboat. There was a group of us that were there. And when they put the teepee up, some of the men from the Sundance Lodge were helping with the teepee, and they brought in grandfathers for the fire pit. And this was one of them. And I was saying, because it looked different, I asked them what it meant, and one of the men just said, it's another grandfather. And I says, I didn't think so. So when we started our ceremony, we done a grandfather reading. Auntie Katie done a grandfather reading on this, and the name given to it was the Peacemaker. And I was to carry it to wherever a survivor was, and it didn't say any survivor specifically of any abuse, or it could be a cancer, a victim of fire, a victim of any kind of abuse. So this is what I carry and I bring here. It isn't necessarily part of the bundle because it's its own bundle in itself. And I've been carrying this, I carry it and share it with people for the last 15 years. And it helps to ground, I find. And sometimes I put it on a table or somewhere. But because most people can't or are older and can't get down, that's why I do that. But mostly it'll sit on the ground or on the floor. So the last time I think that I used it was a while ago. But this grandfather also had to be placed in water for 4 days where it fasted to be cleaned from all of the things that it had gathered in its travel. So this is what I share with everybody here today, and you're welcome to come to touch it, and when you rub your hands over it, you feel it. So this here is used to help ground. It can, whatever it is that you may need. So I'll leave this here until Wednesday. Thank you.
Also, too, before we start and before we begin our testimonies, we're going to have a song. And a song is also known as a prayer, and a prayer is a song. I'm going to sing and going to welcome everybody with the Mi'kmaq Honor Song. Oh, and we have a present. First of all, we're going to have a gift. We have a gift for our elder, Lottie, for sharing the Peacemaker, sharing the stone with us. Thank you. when we were giving these gifts out, we had these little bags, and I said, we have a little gift for you. But then when you see what's inside, it's wow, it's amazing. So at this time, we're going to, if you could please stand, please rise, remove your hat, unless it contains an eagle feather. We're going to do the morning honor song.
Give me the dominate Dandelion no day.
Michael R., for the song, we have a gift for you. So that includes our introductions this morning, and we'll continue now with our session. Also, again, reminder, there's a second session in the Genu room. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Commissioner, Hello, elders. I'm here with the Victoria Paul family and Families of the Heart. So I'm going to let in the individuals before you introduce them, and then we'll move on to the oath.
Linda Maloney. I'm a residential school survivor. I'm from Millbrook.
Cheryl Maloney, I'll be speaking as a Family of the Heart today.
Deborah and Paul, victim's son from Indian Brook.
Candace Silboy, Victoria Paul's niece from Sydney, I guess.
And I have behind me a family that are actually here as my supports for a little bit this morning, Clayton and Miriam Saunders.
Thank you, Mr. Registrar. If we could have the... Did you want to speak?
Okay, good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
Did you wish to make a solemn affirmation with the eagle feather this morning?
Yes.
Okay, very well. Do you solemnly affirm that the story and the truth you'll share today with the Commissioner will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Yes. It's Debron? Debron? Devron. Good. Good morning. Devron, do you solemnly affirm that the story and the truth you'll share with the Commissioner this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. I think it's Candace. Okay, good morning, Candace.
Morning.
Candace, do you solemnly affirm that the truth you will share with the Commissioner this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Madam Commissioner, we're going to start with Cheryl Maloney, who is a friend of our Family of the Heart, and she's been behind a lot of the investigation work that's been done to push this matter forward on behalf of the family.
I have a photo of some of the pictures of missing murdered women that I asked on the slideshow. I don't know who's doing that, but if you have a chance to put that picture up, there's 5 pictures from the memorial table out there. That's Kimber, one of the girls I'm going to be speaking for. But there's I'll have to just go the way it's in my heart right now. There was a picture in the memorial table of families of missing murdered women, and Victoria's was there, Loretta Saunders is there, Nora Bernards was there, Tanya Brooks was there, and Victoria. And as a friend, for me to be here, I'm not a family member. I didn't spend Christmases, births with Victoria and her family. I grew up next to her. It's very difficult for me to be here speaking on behalf of the family, and I never like to speak on behalf of the family. And the reason I've asked Miriam and Clay to sit behind me for a few minutes this morning is because I think it's so important to allow the families to have their own voice. And under the rarest, most horrible circumstances, should we, as groups, organizations, or people, claim to speak on behalf of the families? And I've heard across the country, groups, political organizations, politicians say they're speaking on behalf of the families. I am a politician, but I never speak on behalf of those families. I never, unless they ask me to help them find their voice, then I'll get up and I'll help them speak. And this is the situation here, and why I wanted the Saunders here, because a few years ago they didn't have their voice, and I helped because they asked. But yesterday I witnessed them finding their voice, and so I take this role very, very serious. I am not the one that was at the births. I wasn't holding her hand when she was in labor. I wasn't there when she lost her family or the stories. I was there as a childhood friend, though, and I'll talk about that now. I'm just going to thank you guys for being here for this minute. I know you're going to go, so whenever you feel like it, but thank you guys for being here. Victoria was my neighbor, and she was smarter than me. I have a couple degrees, but she was smarter than me. My sister, Victoria, her cousin Bridget, believe it or not, the daughters Annie Mae, Akwash, were on this side of me. Victoria ended up living on this side of me. As children, we were playing on the res, we were playing in the woods. We had a street it's called Church Street. And we were allowed to go up to the ball field, or the graveyard on this side, and then kind of loop down, and then on the other hill was the church. So as children, we were allowed to only go up to the church and up to the graveyard. But we could go as far as we wanted to into the woods behind us. And that is where all my memories of Victoria is in those woods. I remember one day we were hiding from our mother. She wanted to go to town. We hid in a tree. We climbed to hide in a tree in those woods. And we must have been young, because we thought she couldn't see us or find us. A few minutes later, she's under the tree yelling at us. So we must have been really small in the woods, because, you know, when you think you can't be seen and you're seen. And the other story of Victoria in the woods, and this is really embarrassing, I don't want to tell you guys, but my sister and Victoria were older than me. And we went to get a Christmas tree because we were so poor, there was no tree up, and we had no tree. So we found an old saw in the basement. We walked into the woods, and we're looking at trees, and we're looking at the tops of really, really tall trees. And if anybody ever went for Christmas trees, you know they all look good at the top. So they were sawing, and we must have been young. I know I was following them. They were my leaders. The tree wasn't following. The saw wasn't doing good. Victoria said, "Cheryl, climb up there. Sway the tree." So I climb up there, and I sway the tree, and they're sawing away, and the tree fell. But Victoria was smarter than me. And I'm going to go later in our recommendations about how you value the lives of Indigenous women and what they're worth when you die wrongfully. You know, what's the value of somebody that comes from an impoverished community where everybody is living below the poverty line. So I'll talk about that in my recommendations, and they're going to be I'll read those later. So in August 2009, I was in Ottawa. I was working on environmental files. And I heard about my neighbor. She lived right next door to my mother. I was away a lot. Victoria probably seen my mother more than I did. And I heard she went into the drunk tank and came out on life support. And I thought, what the heck happened in there? And so I waited to say, this is a public outcry. Somebody has to find out what happened in there. From what I heard, And then from the actual bouncers, I later heard, not through just community gossip, but one of the bouncers, that there was a whole bunch of cops struggling with her to throw her in the back car. I can't give you the number, whether it was 5, 6, or 7, but we know there was a lot there. And so there was a struggle. They got her into the police car. She went into the Truro police cell, and she came out on life support and died. And I was waiting. I said, there's got to be a public outcry. The chiefs, somebody, and nothing. It didn't hit the news again. Quiet as can be. And I thought, geez, nobody's saying anything or doing anything. But reading the reports, Kimber, and her picture was up there earlier, was knocking on doors. And Kimber isn't here. Kimber is her sister. Kimber was knocking on doors, and Kimber was brown. Like the Saunders told us yesterday, if you're blonde and you got a law degree, people might answer you more than they answered Kimber. She was trying, but there was no one listening. And there was no group, organization, leadership, advocacy in this country whose job it was to say, did the police do the right thing? Is she okay? What went wrong? So November 2009, I became the president of Nova Scotia Native Women. Victoria and I have been on this journey. It's been 8 years now. I became the president of Nova Scotia Native Women because nobody was speaking. That dead silence, September, October, November. And then now, Marie, can you guys show me the banner over there? Can somebody bring the banner up, a couple people? So I became president, and we had no money, and I didn't do a lot of media. And we bought this banner. I actually put it on my credit card, and this isn't the actual one. There's another one. Turn around for the cameras. $132, and a little bit of stubbornness. I went to the family, and we started asking what happened to Victoria. And you'll see some of the old footage that banner was everywhere. We were banging on doors. We were calling on ministers, calling for inquiries. You know, what the heck did the police do? And up and that point, it seemed like no one cared. Okay, that's good. Thank you, guys.
So you want to talk about what happened?
Yes, but I just want to say that from the time in 2009 when we started, I had, Deveron wasn't there. Deveron went in the cell with his mom and didn't come out, and we're going to go through that chronology of that soon. But at that time, I had Victoria's sister Kimber with me, and I had her dad with me, and they wanted to speak. People weren't listening. So at that point in time, the family made me an agent for the family to speak on behalf of Victoria. So the next 3 years, we started this process to seek answers. Deveron, do you have anything you want to add yet? I'm going to ask you every so often, but okay. We started asking what's going on. Truro Police in 2009, there's a few statements, and I've seen in the reports, there was even statements that said they're doing a report. There was indications that it was going to be an independent report looking at criminality and wrongdoing. And so everybody's waiting and waiting and waiting, and patiently, because we have no clue what happened from the time she went in for 18 months. 18 months came, and we had no clue what happened between 3 a.m. in the morning till 1 in the afternoon the following day. 10 hours. What happened there that she came out on life support? So now there's people waiting. We're asking questions, and I have to hats off to the media, because there was a couple of media guys at the time that would come every 6 months and say, "Did you hear anything yet?" And they would do a story. And those stories kept her alive when nobody else seemed to care or was listening to the cries of the family. So media, sometimes I'm portrayed bad, but mostly, you know what? Without them, we would never be here at this point. Without them, we wouldn't have an inquiry and the stories wouldn't be heard. So 18 months later, I get a call from the Truro Police Services. And I get Kimber, and we meet at our little office in Truro, and the police came, and they give me a executive summary of a report. And the executive summary said that not much. It had everything blacked out. The police said this was only an internal report to see if we followed all our internal procedures and policies. I said, "What do you mean, just an internal?" "Well, we don't even need to give you this." That's what they told me. "We don't even need to give you this. This was just our internal document." I said, "Well, why was the family and the community and the public waiting for this report that is supposed to tell us what happened in there and if anybody did anything wrong to her?" And the little, I think it was 18 pages, lots of things blacked out. Some of the things we did see in there, though, was Commissioner Skinner. And I'll try to go back and give you some of the highlights of what we found in the report. Commissioner Skinner came on around 6 a.m. Victoria went in around 3 a.m. She was alert. She was answering questions. She had an ankle bandage. She took her ankle bandage off. She rewrapped her ankle bandage in the cell. It was wrapped properly, correctly. It stayed on all night. She was a little sassy to the cell guard that she didn't like. No signs of alcohol poisoning. That was the limit. That was the base that her care should have been assessed by for the rest of the evening and the next morning and the next afternoon. So she had a good little sass and a good little laugh. So I think she was even laughing when she was sassing. They noticed her sleeping, and then around 6:30, they noticed her on the cell floor. And at one point in time, around 8, they came and to assess her, and Skinner was saying, "She looks like there's, we need something may be wrong with this." And I don't have the report in his actual words. But he started, when he took over his duty, he came on and he started to say, "You know what, she's not responding, and or she doesn't seem well." And in his notes from the Truro report, I think this is what the one thing that they did share with us that we could see is that he asked her, "Are you okay?" when she was on the floor. And she said no. And he told me this because he called me and he said, she said no. And he said, "Well, what's wrong?" And that was her last word. The next thing she did was point to her face and a tear coming down her eye. And that's the only thing we got from the Truro Police report from Halifax.
And so for the commissioner's benefit, the Truro Police is who was holding her? Is that where she was?
Yeah, the Truro Police Services is the cell she went into.
And the Halifax Police?
The report that 18 months later that told us what had happened to not what happened to her, but Constable Skinner sharing her last word and the anguish and the pain. I also want to point out at this time, and I never seen the videos and I wonder what they look like, that she had her pants half down and urinated in the cell. So by this time she had taken a stroke. She was still able to talk. She said no and pointed to her face. She attempted to take her pants down so she wouldn't soil herself, is all I can assume. And then, so for the next 4 more hours, she laid in that cell in her own urine, on the floor of the cell, with her condition deteriorating. Halifax, Truro, they say she would have died anyways. But I watch, Heart and Stroke Foundation get help right away. Get help right away. And if she could have removed her pants and said no and pointed to her face and tried to cry out for help, we don't know for sure that, she may have been here in some capacity or another. So, over the next number of hours, and it's here in my report, this report.
So you're referring to the report of,
This is the Victoria Rose Paul investigation report.
okay,
And in this report, it talks about the timeline, 6:15, 6:35, it just goes on. Commissioner Skinner was increasingly getting concerned. Takes it to Sergeant Henderson. Henderson says, if you get a grunt, that's good enough. Never mind measuring her from when she came in sassy and a little stagger, a little waver, to the point where you're getting a grunt. She's laying on the floor in her own urine. And Commissioner Skinner got him downstairs around 8:37 to come look at her. So Sergeant Henderson came down at 8:37, looked at her on the floor in her own urine, and got a grunt. I don't know what his response was. The wording, it's all here in the report that I will submit. But he just said, do more frequent checks. We're not even sure if he said that or Commissioner Skinner suggested it. It's not clear there. Then he got on the road. He got on the road. He left the police and he went on the road. I don't know where he went. But the Commissioner Skinner was visibly concerned. His notes that we got from that 18-month report, he was visibly concerned. He kept going back. And he called us later. And I think he's left. I don't think he's still there anymore. He called me and the grandfather. And he wanted to apologize because he thinks he should have just disobeyed the hierarchy of the Truro Police Forces, disobeyed Sergeant Henderson and made that call. He struggles with that. He's a Christian man, and he reached out to the family. And I can't say the family forgave Commissioner Skinner or anything, but I can tell you that the grandfather wanted to meet with them. He wanted to meet with them and let them know that he didn't hold it against him. And we were supposed to arrange that call. But then we lost the grandfather and he died. So they never had that meeting. And I know it was probably important for Commissioner Skinner because he felt bad, and that night haunts him. It doesn't seem to haunt Sergeant Henderson. It doesn't seem to haunt Truro Police Services. And I say that because I see nothing change, and there was no finding of any wrongdoing, no suspension, no firing, no criminal lens for failure to provide the necessities of life. Nothing happened for Victoria and for justice, and nothing happened to the police. This was the first report, the 18 months. We weren't happy with that once we had a glimpse of what was going on, so off we went again. We had another news conference. Her family was there to speak. Kimber was there to speak for the family. We demanded an inquiry into the death of Victoria Paul, and we had our banner, and we were fighting. And the Premier said, okay, not right away. After we got that 18-month report, we made appointments with Police Complaints Commission, and we went to Human Rights. We said there's got to be something somewhere that can be done. So we went and knocked on doors, and we got to the Police Complaints Commission with our 18-month report and said, look at this. Something has to be done. And the lady there said, you know, I wish I could do something, but there's a statute of limitations for police complaints for 6 months. I said, but it's their fault. They kept it for 18 months. So I said, all right. Went to the next appointment. Same day, office building, downtown Halifax. Went to the Human Rights Commission. We're like, there's got to be some grounds. We're really searching for something here. And they said, well, statute of limitations for human rights is 12 months. So I remember the feeling coming down the elevator, sitting at the bottom of the step. I put my hands in my head like this, and I was like, this is just wrong. This is wrong to happen in Canada. This is wrong. There's got to be something that can be done. We weren't willing to accept she died in natural causes and there's no wrongdoing of anybody. So my next stop was at the law school to meet with an environmental law professor. I just happened to be walking by the office of my former professor, Archie Kaiser. And I had that report from Truro, and he said, what are you doing, Cheryl? And I walked in, and I said, well, I don't know what to do anymore. You know, I'm pretty broken. And he works with people with disability and the law, and amazing professor. And he looked at that, and he said, I've been watching, and we sat there, and these are the issues. So I get a call the next day. The Premier wants to meet with me because we're in the news, we're carrying our banner and sharing our story as much as we can. The Premier said, okay, we'll see you Monday morning. Who's coming with you? I said, I don't know, really. Right now, me and I think Kimber. So I walk in Monday morning with Professor Archie Kaiser, who's the expert in this area of law. We walk into the Premier's office, who went to Dal Law School. The Minister of Justice was there, who went to Dal Law School. The lawyers in the room went to Dal Law School, and I walked in with their professor. I was a little smug. I was like, yeah, we're here. Level that playing field. And so the Premier said, well, we can't do an inquiry, we'll do a Section 7 review. We'll take it, because just a couple days before, I was at the bottom of that building with no place to go. So that's where this report came from. It came out, I think, maybe a year later. Now we're almost into year 3. And 2 things came out of it, and then nothing else. One is we're able to see what happened to Victoria. It was there. The second thing was that the report said that Sergeant Henderson failed in his duties to Victoria Paul. after the Halifax police did their investigation of Truro police, and we'll talk about that in the recommendations, finding that all the policies were met, there was no wrongdoing, no need for criminal charges or anything else, we got the report that said Sergeant Henderson failed in his duties. And we knew what happened to Victoria. Other than that, nothing happened. The recommendations are weak and not implemented. I'll speak to that in a little bit too. So I said, what about criminality? Because they indicated in Halifax Truro Police that they were doing, Halifax was doing a, you know, if there's any wrongdoing under the Police Act or criminality, it would come up, but it didn't. They said, no, we're only doing policies. Then we thought this would look at criminality, and then they said, no, we can't. We don't have the mandate in the province under this act to look at criminality. So off we went with the pavement and the banner again, demanding a police criminal scan of this report. So we got the criminal scan. I don't even remember who did anymore at this point in time. It came back and said there's no criminal wrongdoing. So that's a third report that we got on this case. Every single one of them can't find anything wrong with Sergeant Henderson failing in his duties to Victoria Paul. We've taken it as far as we can. We pretty much gave up on Canadian and Nova Scotia options. The inquiry here, it's our last resort in Canada. This may be something, you know, at the UN they say there's equal protection of the police guaranteed. But in Canada, equal protection of police is not applied equally to male and female, especially Indigenous men and women. So this is where we are today. This case broke my heart when I said Victoria 8 years ago was the reason I became the president of Native Women. I've taken it as far as I could. After that, we started demanding an inquiry. And that's why we demanded this inquiry, is because there is no recourse. There is nobody listening to all these reports. There's more reports than this in this country. Nobody is listening. Nobody seems to care. There's no wrongdoing of the police in this country. Halifax police, and you'll see in the report, there was an appearance of conflict of interest. The Halifax Police Sergeant McNeil had to request, or Truro Police McNeil had to make his request to his cousin, the deputy sergeant or something of the Halifax police, in order to do this review. So he was asking his cousin to come, of one police force, asking his cousin in the other police force to come and do this review of my police force, right? They say there's an appearance of conflict of interest. I say there is a conflict of interest, not just that they're cousins, because police should not be reviewing police, and that is in our recommendations also. So here we are at the end of the day on the process. I need you guys to hear a story from Devron about his mother. I didn't know his name. You know why I didn't know his name? Because his mom never said Devron. She said, my baby. You remember? Everywhere we went, oh, my baby. My sister and I were laughing about it today. I didn't know his name, but he was her baby. And I think it's important to hear about that relationship, because since then, Victoria had one child and one grandchild. And since that time, she lost her sister in a car accident, her father died, and two brothers died tragically in the last 5 years, in the last 5 years here. So I want Devron to talk about how important his mother was to him and to his son. And then I'm going to ask if you want to share what happened that night, because the police said she was arrested in the report, in the facts, she was arrested for and put in the drunk tank, right? For intoxication. It nowhere mentions the police out there and the physical struggle with her that evening. And we don't know if she got injured at that time. I wasn't there. Devron can share what that night was like, trying to get information about his mother and stuff. Are you ready? You want to do it anyways? Candace, you want to say a couple things while he's about Victoria?
My auntie was really loving. She loved us all a lot, and she was always very giggly and bubbly. And over the years, she would talk to us all like we were the little kids. And whenever I seen her, she would put me on her lap and squeeze me and talk to me like a baby. And she was always like joking around and just really there for all of us. That day we found out about her. My dad called me, which is Victoria's brother. His name is Timmy Paul. And he told me, and Victoria's not doing good, and that I needed to come home. And I said, right now? He said, yeah, you gotta come home right now. So Aunt Kim got on the phone and she said, you gotta come home, it doesn't look good for Andy. I said, okay. And when I got there, she was all hooked up and my dad was crying so hard. And he said he just wants to help her. And we felt bad for Devron that he had to see her like that. Since then, it's like our whole family died. First it was my dad. He died of an overdose. Then my Uncle Jeff, he also died of an overdose. Then my Uncle Abram. And then my grandpa died of cancer. And then after that, our Auntie Kimber died. And she was our rock. She was everything to us. She protected all of us. and made sure nothing happened to any of us. And she wanted justice for Auntie Vic. She was more angry than hurt. But she missed her a lot, and I remember going there and we'd always cry and hold each other and talk about Auntie Vic and everyone else who passed on. And it's hard to think about. And I just came here to support Devron and sit up here on behalf of everyone else that passed on, and hope that something happens so that this doesn't happen to anybody else. Any other race, it don't matter. We're all human beings, and we're all meant to be treated equal and checked on, and it just feels like my Auntie Victoria's life meant nothing. It's like, who cares? She's drunk. Don't go help her because she's drunk. Well, people overdose and everything like that, and you go to the hospital and they pump their stomach and they help them. Like, if someone comes in with an overdose, what do you say? Then they're too high, or they did that to themselves, so we won't help them. That's what it feels like. And after that time, Auntie Victoria was laying in her urine with her pants down. There was a woman guard that went in and dressed her up. But then one of the guards said that it would be best for her to lay on the floor so she wouldn't fall off the bed and hurt herself again. But they didn't give her a mattress or a blanket or nothing. They just left her there on the cold cement floor. So everyone hurts, and everyone's wanting all the right things, wanting justice for everybody, and I'm just here to support Devron, and he's a part of his mom, and I love him a lot, and he's all I have left of her, and our family got smaller, so we need to all stick together.
I wasn't going to come to this yesterday, but I knew that my mother would have wanted me to come to it, speak for her. So I came. When I lost my mother, it made me a stronger person. I learned how to control my emotions over the years, losing half my family. Like, my son's gonna grow up with no grandmother now. But all I wanted was just answers. I just wanted answers on what happened to my mother when it happened. And it took him like 18 months. By the time I read over the stuff what happened to her, it was like 2 years later or something. But, yeah. It still hurts me. But I got my friends and family to support me, so I still struggle with my emotions, my addictions. came to support all the families and friends who lost somebody they loved too.
Just want to ask, the police never interviewed you in their report, right? And in the report, they interviewed a lot of people, but they didn't interview Devron when he was with his mother from outside the bar when the police took her. Do you want to tell that story? No? Okay.
So did you have, Cheryl, did you have some specific things that you wanted the commissioners to consider in terms of recommendations?
Yeah, but I can't find my glasses. Anyone with reading glasses handy? Okay, this is good. Thanks for my support. Yesterday, when I was listening to the Saunders, I was crying and crying because I was able to. The inquiry and the supports and everybody else was here. Victoria was my first official work as the president of the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association, and I find it very fitting fighting for Victoria and the last 8 years fighting for an inquiry, fighting against Harper. My banner's been beaten and so am I. So this presentation to you guys and reading these recommendations is actually also the last official job that I'm doing as the president of Nova Scotia Native Women. I'm stepping down on Saturday. So this has been an 8-year journey, and I'm giving this to the inquiry to take on. So many families in this country have been carrying it. We've been searching the ditches. We've been stomping the pavement with banners and flyers and candles, and we're tired. I want the inquiry to work. I want you guys to do a good job with this stuff. I want Nova Scotia, the provinces, the federal government to do a good job and make these changes. So I'm just going to read some things that, some are a little legal recommendations that we need. We've been through 3 investigations with Victoria. We know what's not working here in Canada. The likelihood of comparable examples of suffering of other Indigenous women and girls in the criminal justice system has undoubtedly been ignored. At least Victoria Paul's story has been told in the media, in this report, and 3 reports, and before the inquiry today. The limits on the investigation included the acceptance that it did not have the authority to examine events through a lens of potential criminality, which was unfortunate, as there was neither a prosecution of any type nor a police disciplinary proceeding. For Victoria, there has never been any consequences for the findings, the wrongdoings, the failure of police, and the failure of Sergeant Lee Henderson to provide the necessities of life for Victoria. There are structural problems when it comes to getting legal redress for the family of someone who died as a result of willful or negligent conduct or neglect of duty of another person in Nova Scotia. Some of these impact the families of Aboriginal women more than other families. At common law, surviving members of the deceased family had no right to sue a person who had may been responsible for the death. This was changed in the late 1800s in England by Lord Campbell's Act, and in Nova Scotia by the Fatal Injuries Act. The courts interpreted the Fatal Injuries Act so that only pecuniary losses were compensated. Pecuniary losses means monetary losses. This was later changed to non-monetary losses, including loss of care, guidance, and companionship. Damages are based on actual losses. The more a family would have expected to receive financially from the deceased in their life, the more compensation the family would be entitled to. From this, you can see that a family of a deceased who had a high income or privilege would be entitled to more compensation than the family of a deceased who had been receiving a lower income, was on social assistance, an Aboriginal woman, a survivor or descendant of the residential school, and from a Mi'kmaq community suffering economically from forced centralization or relocation. The impact of systemic and discriminatory laws against Indigenous women and people further limits and disadvantages Indigenous women and their families when it comes to evaluation of the loss of life and compensation. Because of the expenses involved in hiring lawyers to pursue claims for wrongful deaths, most cases are taken on a contingency fee basis, where the lawyer agrees to accept a percentage of the compensation received as legal fees. The more compensation that is likely to be awarded, the more likely a lawyer will take on the case. So the Indigenous women are more likely to receive social assistance or have lower income than average. This will result in fewer claims of the family of Indigenous women, as they would be less financially feasible. Unfortunately, and I'm taking my opportunity to throw this in here, in the Mi'kmaq territory, the failure of Government of Canada to implement the 1999 Supreme Court of Canada decision of Marshall to allow access to fisheries resources, especially for women, Mi'kmaq women, is one such example of historic and continued denial of economic opportunities. The denial of our resources and our rights in this country keeps Aboriginal women and peoples in poverty. We are worth less over and over again because of government's policies, laws, and inaction. Non-pecuniary damages are relatively low, $10,000 to $30,000 for a child who lost a parent. These amounts tend not to be as influenced by income of the deceased, but are influenced by the quality of the relationship between the family members of the deceased. In Mi'kmaq families, the role of grandmother is valued as much or often greater than the role of mother. And we have often heard stories in Mi'kmaq communities where a grandmother would come to visit one day and take one of the kids home. This is common in my Mi'kmaq communities. They would just take the children and that was it. They're gone, they're with the gram. And that gram would teach that child. They would teach them things that they wouldn't get with their mother. The valuation of a relationship of the extended Mi'kmaq community may not be recognized in the colonial court processes and would need both a strong legal team and community experts on Aboriginal legal traditions to give value to Indigenous relationships and their worth. In personal injury cases where a person suffers but does not die, that person is able to bring a lawsuit on their own against the person responsible. This includes the ability to claim punitive damages in appropriate cases. However, in Nova Scotia, our courts have held that punitive damages are not available to families under the Fatal Injuries Act. Punitive damages are about punishing the wrongdoer. The court will use punitive damages to denounce the behavior and punish the individual. Punitive damages can be very significant. Their purpose is to deter future incidents and punish the defendant. By their nature, they need to be large enough to be a deterrent to change the behavior of the defendant and others in the future. This may require stiff penalties. For the case of Victoria, the Truro Police, and other cases like this across the country, there is no punitive damage, there is no punishment, there's no recourse, there's no reason why not choose an Aboriginal woman to kill. Why not? It's cheaper. Punitive damages are rare because the circumstances where they are needed are rare. However, where they are deserved in a wrongful death case, they are not available in Nova Scotia like they are in some other provinces. While the Nova Scotia Fatal Injuries Act does not explicitly say that punitive damages cannot be awarded, some fatal injury acts in other provinces do explicitly state that families cannot get punitive damage. Neither does our act say that punitive damages are allowed. Some provincial wrongful death statutes do say they are allowed. Where the legislation is silent on the point, courts need to decide whether punitive damages are allowed or not. The courts of Nova Scotia have decided that punitive damages are not allowed. In Alberta, which has a similarly worded act, the Alberta Court of Appeal held that punitive damages could be awarded in some cases. Of course, our provincial legislature could change the Fatal Injuries Act to allow punitive damages in Nova Scotia, and this is one of the recommendations that we'd like to make on behalf of the Paul family. The inability to seek punitive damage in Nova Scotia takes away the ability of the family to ensure that the person responsible for the death of a deceased is punished for the wrongdoing. In my opinion, where the death of a person is caused by blatant racism, discrimination, wrongdoing, such as a failure to provide the necessities of life, cause, and death, punitive damages are appropriate to punish the behavior. To the extent that Indigenous women are more likely to be victims of wrongful death where racism was a factor, the families of Indigenous women are more disadvantaged by the Nova Scotia bar against punitive damage in wrongful death suits. Again, this has to do with the feasibility of even starting a wrongful death suit. If punitive damages are available, more damages are theoretically available, and the lawsuit is more likely to be seen as feasible by a lawyer. In order for somebody like Victoria, who had little income, died, we say a cell death, by neglect or failure to provide necessities of life, finding a lawyer where the damages might be $10,000, if that. Or in our case, Devron was institutionalized from that day. His son was a minor, and the Fatal Injuries Act says you're statute barred from claiming later. So once again, we've seen statutory limitations used in favor of the police, and then again used against the family, again in favor of the police and government in this country. The families of Indigenous women would benefit more than most if the province allowed punitive damages in wrongful death cases. This in turn would benefit living Indigenous women as a deterrence effect of the punitive damages becoming widespread. Sorry about that. The case of Victoria Paul, the Robert Picton victims, the search going on in BC Farm as we speak today, attest to the little value given to Indigenous women in this country. Therefore, we would like to recommend and urge the province of Nova Scotia and other jurisdictions which do not allow punitive damage in wrongful deaths to enact or amend legislation allowing for punitive damages in wrongful death cases. In addition, the days of police investigating police should not happen anywhere in Canada. The days of the systemic old boys school mentality must stop. Therefore, it is also recommended that each province enact legislation requiring independent reviews of cases of wrongful death or serious injury by police or in police custody, including the powers to launch investigations when parties are in no position. As Devron, when he, after his mother died, he was incarcerated for a number of years. And also in the interest of minors, such as Devron's son, Dominic, who did not have the capacity to do so on their own, or in cases that would be in the public interest to do so, or the failure to do so, it would put the administration of justice into disrepute. In Nova Scotia, the Police Complaints Commission could not launch an investigation without a complainant. And for our case, we didn't have the information for 18 months, so we were statutorily barred. Removal of statutory limitations for police misconduct when death occurs in relevant provincial legislation. In Victoria's case, the family received no information on her death or details until 18 months after her death. The result was that statutory limits prevented investigation under the Police Complaints Commission and also the Human Rights Commission, which are 6 and 12 months. Finally, police reviews and investigations must be accountable to families and communities and should include time limits which require disclosures of investigations in a reasonable time, or a process requiring the police to apply for extensions if needed. The 18 months waiting, the 18 months thinking things are being done, no answers for the family, should not happen to any family. The family should have regular updates. If there's delays for any reason, they should apply for an extension so that we and other families will not have to go through this. This is one case. This is one case of wrongdoing of police in this country. This is one example, and if Victoria wasn't born next door and played in the woods and fell that tree on me, and I'm light, and I have a law degree, we wouldn't have even got the 3 reports done. But the sad fact is, through everything we did, nothing has happened. Sergeant Henderson is going on life as usual. The Truro Police Services did not change. I had a call a month ago from an Inuit woman who woke up in the Truro Police with no shirt on, and she didn't know how long she was like that. And they said, well, you took your shirt off yourself. Cover her up. Cover her up. Nothing has changed in this country from Victoria's case, and we really sincerely hope that this inquiry, the province of Nova Scotia, the government of Canada and Canadians hear these stories and make some changes. That's the end for me, but I want to give the opportunity, Devron, anything else? You're all right? Thank you. Is there any questions? Because I think we have everything out that we needed.
Bonjour. Merci, Cheryl. Before I make a comment, I just want to state something here to Devron. You're more than welcome to do a statement in private if you want, in camera, with one of the commissioner if you want, or with one of our staff. Along with the people you want in that room to share your truth, your story. So I'm offering this to you. So today, next week, when you're ready. Okay? So, merci beaucoup, Cheryl. I was looking for you in the room yesterday for the opening remarks, where when I was mentioning when one person do something and then you realize that there's many other people across or around that person who will support and so on, and we see the ripple or the comment ça là, when you drop a rock in the water, the circle that it makes. Ripple effect. So, I know also there's lots of families that you carry in your heart, and you fought for them, and you're still fighting for them, and I commend you for that. I hear from where I am in Quebec. I read news, and there's something special for the East Coast, and your name come often. And it's important for the families, it's important for us. When I say us, I would say family members and survivors. But for the inquiry also. And we have one shot with this inquiry. And personally, I want to make sure that we do it right, because we won't be able to do it again. And with reports like you presented, with recommendation that you shared, the ripple effect will be very important also for women. If you remember the human rights report, what they presented up north on Highway of Tears, how the police responded, to Indigenous women. And I hear, or I can feel that there's some trend or some connection here in the East. So tomorrow we're launching the interim report, not me, but my colleagues, because us, Kayak and I, will be very involved with the families here. But there's a recommendation maybe that will, one of them respond, I hope, and I pray a lot for that. But if we can receive officially your recommendations, because they're very powerful. So that was my comment. And I want to say thank you to Candice. Oui. Merci beaucoup. So I want to say thank you to support. C'est ton cousin, your cousin? Ouais. Very, very important. And I saw you yesterday. Circle. So I was looking for you to go give you a hug. You give the picture to, so I thought she was your mom for a second. So I started a rumor, oh, that's the children of. So thank you so much, and you won't stop. I know you. I know you. It's a title. You gave a lot to that organization. You made us move in Ottawa, shake and all of that, but I know you won't stop, and I hope you don't. Thank you.
So if we can conclude or adjourn this matter? If we can conclude or adjourn this matter?
So at this time, we're having the gift-giving ceremony, and we're brushing them down with our elders and our eagle wings. This will conclude the morning, the first session. The next community hearing will happen at 10:45, so the next session is at 10:45. And we thank you very much. Walalio.
Hi, everyone. Just before we get started, I just want to do an acknowledgement. I just want to acknowledge that the Chief of Police is here in the room and the Deputy Minister of Justice. We have a special consideration around uniformed officers. We know there's so many uniformed officers that support families and survivors in this process. And part of our protocol is to ensure that the family is comfortable with having a uniformed officer in the room, and they are very much comfortable. We've heard so many great things about the Chief's willingness to learn and understand and be part of this process to support families and survivors. So just wanted to acknowledge that for everyone else. So, well, Alan, and thank you both for being here. Thank you to the family.
morning, Madam Commissioner and fellow elders. We are going to now speak with Ms. Gilbert, and I'll let Darlene Gilbert, who is sitting in the middle of her supports, introduce herself and the individuals that are sitting beside her.
Hello, my name is Darlene Gilbert. I'm from Halifax. My clan name is Tony. My mother was Vivian Eileen Tony. And this is Elizabeth Sheen. She's my therapist. On my right and on my left is Elizabeth Marshall, my elder. Behind me is my sister, Janice, who was on the Highway of Tears with me when I was out there.
So, Mr. Registrar, if we could have the oath.
Good morning, Darlene. Welcome. Do you promise to tell your truth to the Commissioner in a good way this morning?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. So, Darlene, if you want to just begin by telling the Commissioner a little bit about yourself. So you started to talk about your family. So if you want to just begin talking about who you are and where you grew up.
I'm from Halifax. I've been off reserve status. I've been in off reserve status from birth. My mother and father, my father is Charles Gilbert. My mother was residential schools. She was raped by the priests in her schools. She was an alcoholic, and she died of alcoholism at the age of 39 from the trauma of the residential schools. My father, he supported us. He was white, he's French. I have 3 elder siblings that were put into adoption, foster homes before me, by right. I probably would have been adopted out if my father didn't leave the family that he had and go with my mother to save me from being scooped into the system. I grew up in Dartmouth in a very alcoholic home. My father, he was a functioning alcoholic. He took care of us the best that he could. My mother, she was the alcoholic that took us as children to where she went drinking. So all through downtown Dartmouth, I know all of the old trunk houses, as they call it. In one of those houses, I was raped at the age of 9 by my mother's drinking buddy. We went to court, and the man walked out of the courtroom with 6 months probation and 500 meters to stay away from me. He lived in the same area, downtown Dartmouth. I grew up very insecure. You know, fighting about my mother and my father, always fighting about that she wanted to be home with her family and take me home to my people so I could get to know them. And he wanted me to stay in the city away from my people because what had happened to my mother. He didn't want the same thing happening to his daughter. So he didn't believe in the reserves. I was kept away. At the age of 9, after being raped and the man walking out of the courtroom, I As a confused young lady, I acted out. I acted out in school. I was basically my little brother's protector. At the age of 11, social services, because I acted out. And the schools called and I got kicked out of school so much. And they walked in when my father was working. So my mother and my father were not ever married. And I didn't know that at that age. But I remember being put in a car with a suitcase and a teddy bear and watching my mother stand in the doorway with my little brother and being drove away. I didn't know what I did. I felt I did anything wrong to be taken. I just was angry because I was hurt. I was violated. My spirit was taken. I was put into the children's ward at the Nova Scotia Hospital because they didn't know where to stick me, looking ill new with a white name. I truly believe that. So they stuck me in the Nova Scotia Children's Ward, where I went through abuse. I was stuck in, they used to call them timeout rooms when I acted out because I missed my family. You know, they'd throw me in rooms with a bed and bars on the walls. And I still can remember the clock ticking outside that room because you had 15 minutes in that room and you could hear that clock ticking minute by minute. You know, they didn't understand. My mother was across the street in a hospital when I was 12. She was dying, cirrhosis of the liver. I got to be taken over there once before she passed. She was in a coma. And about 2 weeks later, she passed. I, by then, was a ward of the court because at one time, before my mother went into hospital, my father came to take me on a Sunday. I packed my bag, sat in the hallway of the McKay unit, and they took us in the room, and they manipulated my father into coming back the next day. And I was like, no, Daddy, take me now. Please take me now. He said, no, we do it the right way. We come back tomorrow and we talk to these people. My father come in as a functioning alcoholic. He had to have his drink. They could smell the liquor. The police were called, and I became a ward of the province of Nova Scotia at the age of 12. So I went and did whatever they told me. I acted out. I was abused. They called it reprimand. You're being reprimanded for your behavior. It was abuse, period. When you hit a child or you pull her hair, it's abuse. I grew up with the attitude of, you're not my mother, you're not my father, I'm not listening to you, you're not my people. So that was my attitude I grew up with. You know, my mother passed, I was put into a Catholic foster home. He was a deacon of a Catholic church. She was the Archbishop's secretary for the province of Nova Scotia. I was the middle child. I felt out of place. I remember when, after Mother was buried, because I never made my mother's burial, there was a storm come up. And then social services wouldn't take me to my mother's funeral. So I never got to say my goodbyes to my mother. So I went down afterwards in the foster home. They pull into the yard down in Cambridge. We have our own graveyard there. I never knew where my mother was. There was nobody around. They looked at me and they said, go say goodbye to your mother. By myself. 12-year-old child, very confused, very sad and very lonely. And I did not know where in that graveyard my mother laid. Today, still, we're not sure. My uncle takes me, Vincent Tony. He is my last living elder of our clan. He took me there and showed me where my mother was buried. At the age of 14, I was in junior high school in the foster family I had well adapted into by then. My foster sister being like, I was older than my younger foster sister because I had failed grades in school. I was in the lunchroom one time, and as girls, the girls were at the age we were testing out makeup. So I put a little bit of eyeshadow on my eyes, not a big bunch, just a little bit, because I didn't want to get in trouble. Because in the Catholic foster home, we weren't allowed to make makeup, but I was like, I'm going to hang with my girls. I'm at school. I won't get in trouble. The foster sister walked in, and she swiped her hand across my eyes. And she goes, oh, what's this? And for the first time in my life, I was like, oh, what's this? And I hauled off and I slapped her. Because I was tired of people putting their hands on me. They have no right. I went home to the foster home and I was reprimanded, put in the bedroom. Before that, they did not know, the foster home did not know that Uncle Vincent, see, Rita Smith was my auntie. She was chief of Horton Reserve. She was chief of Cambridge Reserve first, and then she was chief of Horton Reserve. They started Horton Reserve. She wanted me, the government, to put me with her. She wouldn't. She wouldn't allow me near my people. So I was shoved so into the system after my mom died. And my father didn't know where I was either. He was in the valley. My uncle became part of council in Shubenacadie Reserve. And he held the title of community service worker, which held the title that he could get into the computers, into the government, to find out where his sister's daughter was. He came to my school at 14. I was called to the office. I figured I did something wrong again. Here we go, you know. And I remember walking into the office and looking, and I was shocked. My uncle was there, and he put the face on, as to say nothing. Don't say nothing. So I didn't. The principal said, there's a social worker here, Darlene, that wants to take you for lunch. Okay. My uncle took me to a lady that was Aboriginal, Ida McLeod. He said, if there's any time that you need to get a hold of your family, you're come to this lady, she will take you to me. She knows where I am. So when that happened with the Catholic foster home, that's where I ran. Within a couple of weeks, the government system was looking for me because I am a ward of the province until I'm 19, I was told, at 16. So I started running at 14. I became a runner because I wanted to be near my people. I felt safe. I felt part of. From there, I went to another foster family, and I got in with my cousins and started partying and drinking, I acted out as I started drinking at 16. Even though I swore I would not ever be like my mom, the alcoholic that she was, I did turn into her. At the age of 16 or 15, I was allowed to go home. They figured the best place for Darlene would be with her grandmother, which was really not my grandmother. It was a black community that my brother was fostered across the street, Patrick, and my little brother and my father lived there. So I called her my grandmother. She raised my mother when she got her residential schools. She gave her a place to live where she had a job off reserve. I lived there for a while. My grandmother went to Maine to visit her daughter. And on the trip, she left her son to watch the house. And she had boarders there and stuff besides me and my brother. So he had to make the breakfast and get the house ready and stuff, and for the boarders and breakfast in the morning for us. And that day I woke up, he was drunk. And as I come down the stairs, he seen my mother. He didn't see me. He seen my mother because he was drinking. And he called my mother every name in the book, except for her name. And no matter what I thought of my mother, nobody got that chance to disrespect her. Nobody. So I packed my stuff and I was ready to leave, and I told him I was leaving because I wasn't staying here. And he slapped me across my face. I went across the street to my brother, and he told me to go to the school and tell them what happened. I went to the school and told him what happened. A social worker came and picked me up. They never told my father that they were taking me. They never told anybody they were taking me. They just scooped me and took me to the Nova Scotia Colored Home for Children. I was 16. I got there, and it's on the Highway 101, 102? 101? Oh, I can't remember what highway. That is out towards Preston area. And that's a very dangerous highway for girls. Girls disappear on that road all the time. They end up in Toronto. They end up being taken. So I was put out there where they figured I couldn't run. I'd be too scared to run. I wasn't scared anymore. I was there for 2 weeks. And these 3 boys, when I walked into the other house, there was 2 units, and I was in 1 unit. And I walked into the other unit because they were the teenage unit. Somewhere, the other one was children's unit, the younger children. And I was jumped by 3 boys surrounded. And I was groped. And I said, they had to count a tree before somebody was getting hurt. What they thought it was a joke. I ended up putting one of the guys in the hospital. He turned out to be my baby's father in the future. My son, he's 34. He apologized to me. I believed him. His apology. I took it. We became friends. But because of his sisters, and I put him in a hospital, his sisters were 2 of the biggest bullies in the home, much feared by rights. So I was warned, stay in your room. Don't go out. You're going to get your ass beat. So social services had no other choice but to come in and move me again. And they moved me to the Johnson House. In the Johnson House, I was calling for James. And one of the workers, I'm not going to mention no names right now, one of the workers, he answered the phone. And see, he couldn't get at me. He's one of the abusers in the home. But he couldn't get at me because I was in a younger unit. He wasn't in my unit. He wasn't working in my unit. So he answered the phone and he said, "Hey, darling, how you doing?" I'm like, "Good, you know." Had a little conversation, staff. And being in the government system, it's, you get into the cars, or the police put you in the cars. But you don't have a choice. Okay? My choices are taken. So he says, "Darlene, want to have coffee? Do a check-in." Sure enough. Sure. Why not? We'll go by the home. So I figured, okay, I could go out there and I could talk to him and find out if Jimmy had any other girlfriends. I was 16, I was naive. I want to know if he had any other girlfriends. Staff could tell me that, you know, if I was just more than one of his girlfriends. And we drove out to number 7 Highway, that's what it is. And we passed the colored home, the units I was in. And I said, "Where are we going?" I thought we were going to color home. He goes, "Yeah, we're going up here to this one." And when he pulled in that long driveway in front of the old colored home, my stomach dropped. I knew what was next. I was put myself into a position where I couldn't get out of. We drove around the back of the color home. He basically said to me, you know, "Front or back, I'm going to get me some, you know it." And I was in a position where I had no one. There was nobody. Where was I going to run to? There was woods around me. I could run into the woods. The highway was down there, but who would say that I would make it back safe? So I got out and I got in the back of the car. To this day, I don't remember that man's face. It's blocked. I live in the city of Halifax with this man that walks the streets. I don't remember his face, which caused me to go into a mental breakdown a couple years ago. But after that, I went back. I figured, he told me, "Nobody's going to believe you. I'm a staff member. You're a kid. Who's going to believe you?" It's true. You know, because through my life when I told stuff, see, I learned how to manipulate at a very young age. When I went to see the shrinks in the Nova Scotia Hospital and K unit, I would tell them the way that my parents were. I would tell them my upbringing. And I would hear all the time, "That's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, no, that's wrong." So I'd go home to the McKay unit after visiting this shrink or psychologist, whatever she was, Pat. And I thought, how can I make this woman stop saying that my family was so bad? So I started to make up stories of good stories of my family. I started to agree with them. Not that I wanted to, or to believe that they were saying, but it helped me not have to hear that it was wrong, you know. So I learned to manipulate. That I learned to people please. After the rape, I was at the Johnson. I was trying to figure out how to get out of the system. And everybody told me, "You know what, darling, you can go a long way on your looks." So I'm like, okay, modeling. Modeling, I can do modeling. Meet the right people, I can get out of here and get a life. But at the same time, that modeling okay phone call came in that day. Right after it came, Darlene, you're pregnant. I planned to have a child. It was the only way to get out of the system. They couldn't take my child. I wouldn't let them. They were not taking mine. And it's the only way I could get out of the system. My son was born September the 1st, 1983. The law passed to get into the community service system to 19 that year, a day before. So I was still in social services for another year. I was put back at the home. Within 2 weeks, I took any dive I could get downtown Dartmouth, North End. I moved into a building where, again, I got into the wrong crowd, and I couldn't get out unless I took a beating. And I took that beating. I had a knife thrown at my head, above my head, and I took that beating from these people. I had met my daughter's father shortly afterwards, and he was leaving Nova Scotia. And I was like, yeah, there's nothing here for me. So I left Nova Scotia with I left Nova Scotia and I went to Toronto. I buried my father at the age of 20 from throat cancer. He was 53. He told me, when I told him I was moving to Toronto, he said the next time he'd see me, I'll be in a wooden box. I couldn't understand what he was talking about. I'm like, no, Dad, I'm not going that far. I'm not going that long. I'll be home. He didn't tell me he had cancer. So the next time I came home, he was in a wooden box. When I left there to Nova Scotia with my son, I brought him. I don't remember getting on the plane. I went into an emotional blackout. I don't remember getting off the plane. I remember walking into my apartment, putting him to bed. There, at the table sat my partner that I was with at the time, my daughter's father, and a bunch of friends of his, and they were doing crack. And I was warned about cocaine. Never touched it before that. I was scared of it. But at that point in time in my life, I felt I had nothing left. And I got the screw-its. And I said, to hell with everything. And I picked up that pipe. With that pipe came a lot of abuse on the streets. Within a year, I was out on the street, supporting my habit, supporting my child, in and out of hostels. The abuse from my partner, it was real. I call myself, I say, you know, they say you're solid in the world that we were in. You know, you had to be solid. You couldn't be a rat. You couldn't, you know, be scared. You had to be solid. You had to watch what you say, how you say it. And if you didn't, you got beaten. You didn't bring home. If you didn't come home at the right times, you got beaten. You know? So I'd say I was beat solid. I'd say today I was beat solid. I don't give out much information about my life, too much. This is the first time, really, except for the Cullen lawsuit. I believe that when I was out there in Toronto on the streets, I had somebody watching over me. Because there's many times I should have been dead. I tried to quit addiction by thinking, okay, I'm going to have another child. I'll stop using. I can do this. I couldn't. I have a 26-year-old daughter now with a 5-year-old granddaughter. I am blessed, very blessed. And she's well, and that was no part of mine. So my 2 children grew up in a abusive, drug-infested house where there was lots of violence. My son was taken at the age of 12. He was abused by his stepdad. My daughter, I lost her when I made a choice one day between the drugs and my daughter. And I lost her. Within 2 weeks of that, I had looked in the mirror and I seen my mother. At the time, the pig farmer was out there in Vancouver on the streets. I know I was in his car. The only thing that saved me was I was taught not to go outside of my territory. We had boundaries. It was explained to me, you have 2 children at home you need to come home to. If you go to your area, the money that you make, you're going to spend it on a cab to get home. So what you've just done, you've done it for free. Or you can hike and you'll make it home. So I stayed in my territory. I wouldn't go outside of Burnaby. And I truly believe that's the thing that saved me. At the same time that the pig farmer was out there, I was up at Hastings, and it wasn't Maine, it was further up. They called it kitty corner because I was young. I look young. I'm 52, so I looked really young. When I was 30, I looked like I was about 22. There was a man that was going around that was grabbing the girls and beating them. There was another fear that was out there at that time for our girls. Girls were disappearing. I could see, I had people drive up in cars and say, show me pictures, have you seen my sister? Have you seen my daughter? No, sorry. I seen her a couple days ago. I haven't seen her since. So our sisters were disappearing. That lifestyle out there was hard enough after I lost my son and my daughter that I decided that I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. So I went into recovery. I went to 12-step programs. I got myself a sponsor. I went to a treatment center. And I worked a program. And I changed my life for 17 and a half years. I came home with my children. I have a recovery baby. She's 15. I love her so much. I brought my children home because it was time. And it's when I got connected with my family again. My last living elder is at Vincent Tony. He's been my rock. You know, he sat at a table one day at my Auntie Regina Tony's funeral. We were all sitting in the back of my Uncle Lawrence's house. And we were on a table, and I was clean and sober. I was 5 years. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you want to know why your mother was the way she was with you? Do you want to know why your mother was the way your mother was? No feeling, cold, because she was raped by the priests." I couldn't understand it. But I could understand why she was the way she was. Why she drank the way she drank. Why I used and drank the way I used. It's because of systemic abuse, generational abuse, the government trying to change who we are. You know, I remember when I was 5 going into Dartmouth Library, and I used to hear people being called the dirty Indian and a squaw, and I'm like, why are these people, you know, so mean to our people? I went to the library, in Dartmouth Library, and I sat in a corner, and I opened a book. And in the NMBs, the books that they had back then had us scalping people. I remember that. I remember saying to myself, that's not who we are. That's not who we are. You know, so I grew closer to my spirit, I believe. Even though they tried to break me, the government, I knew who I was. Because we Mingamangi, I feel it in our spirit who we are. We know. We feel it. With the Color Home lawsuit, I was, like I said, I was 17 years clean. I went into a lawyer's room with the violence worker as a witness to what I was talking to lawyers about. The lawyers basically told me, you know, we believe you, Darlene, that you were raped by this person. But what's 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out? See, the law that they had passed with this is if you were not in the home, but you were in the home at the time of the rape, even though you were a worker and you, this is how you met this man, it don't count. So once again, Darlene didn't count. My integrity was questioned. I was told to lie if I want to get paid for the rape. I don't lie. I won't lie about what is truth. So for money, it's not who I am. But that was put on me as lawyers. A lawyer. How can a lawyer say that to you and ask you to do that to yourself, to lie? Which caused me to go into an emotional mental breakdown. I relapsed. I picked the alcohol back up. I remember going to Avalon. They told me, don't go to mental health, don't go to mental health. Go to your family doctor. I went to my family doctor, he put me on pills, which caused with the alcohol. Didn't tell me not to mix them with the alcohol, knew I was in relapse, but still gave them to me, and I had a mental breakdown. My children have been through a lot in my life because I picked up the same things that my mother did, that people did to me growing up. So I abused my children. I beat them. I yell at them because I was yelled at my whole life. They say, Mommy, why you yell at me?
It's just me. I speak loud, I say. Really, I don't. The girls out there, the government needs to understand that we're not out there because we want it. We're not whores. We're not addicts. We're not junkies. We're people that are hurting because of what has gone to us. We're hurting because of the way we were treated. And this is a form of acting out. Now, acting out is that we take it out on ourselves. Because nobody suffers as much as I suffered in addiction. We all suffer in addiction, we suffer hard. I'm grateful today to say that I'll be 4 months sober by the grace of my Creator Thursday, again. I went to Anishinaabe people, Delco Treatment Center, where I found my spirituality again, the strength, through the elders, the teachings, being able to go in and grieve the way that I should have been able to grieve as a child. But I was 52 years old when I finally got to grieve with an elder. Our children, I believe, in the system needs to be changed. The system needs to be changed for our children. Because when you take us into the system, you take away our culture, and you take away our souls, and you take away who we are. You know, and we need that in order to live. We need that in order to be whole. I teach my children today, I teach my grandchildren Mi'kma'ki. I don't know my language, it was never taught to me, but I know a few words. My granddaughter runs around up in Ontario, and she says, "Jigalassi." I spoke to her last night. She says, "Nanny, I miss you." These are the things that keep me going now today. To know that I am a Kaju, that I can make a difference. But I can say that bringing my children up was not easy because I had to teach them the streets. I had to teach them to be aware of men. I still have to teach my children to be wary of men and their intentions. You know, I have a 15-year-old daughter that's gone through her own trauma while I was in relapse. We're healing together. I call it healing together. And I'm going to continue to teach my child to heal because men stole my spirit. I won't let them steal hers. I'll help her get hers back. You know, I have faith in the Creator. It's the only thing. Many signs through my life have shown me the Creator, and the grandmothers and grandfathers are with me. Because I truly believe I shouldn't be here. I should have been either dead on the side of a road, or I should have OD'd somewhere. But I didn't. So any message that I can carry to this is, this children's system needs to change. And we need to understand why our women are out there abusing themselves. Have some empathy. We don't want sympathy. We don't want you to feel sorry for us. We want you to have empathy for us and understanding why we are who we are. That's all I have to say. Well,
So Darlene, just a couple of questions I have just to clarify some of the things that you said. So you mentioned that you were at a treatment center.
yes.
And what's the name of that treatment center?
Delico?
Delico?
Delico, yeah, in Thunder Bay.
In Thunder Bay?
Yeah.
And in terms of the community that you belong to, what's the name of the community that you, the First Nation or Indigenous community?
Annapolis Valley First Nations.
Okay, and that's here in Nova Scotia?
Yes.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
Rewind. Merci beaucoup, Maître Cox. Thank you very much. Wow, you're beautiful. Very beautiful. And full of hope. You mentioned in your testimony when you shared to us, you share so many things. But there were a moment not long ago you said, how do we say in English, if I can do something or if I can change something? You did it a long time ago. Long time ago, and we have some student in this room, Canadian student from university, and you give them a gift of resilience, not giving up, but most of all, to share a truth that it's not known enough here in Canada. How the women were treated and still treated today. And it's happening everywhere, and they're here witnessing. So I hope the mind and the heart are very open, and they'll be nurses pretty soon. So the health system, it's something we need to study also.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll have good people. We have good people everywhere, I believe in that, and you're one of them, and I know your warriors beside you, surrounding you, are amazing women.
Yes.
So, and knowing that you're having your children back and grandchildren, as mothers, it's important. So thanks for your gift, and to change the system, you have me on that, that's for sure. Am I going to be able to do it? There's four of us commissioners, or we're not magicians, but if we had that magic stick, we would change it. But your testimony will help us to bring that to the governments, not only one, but we have to remember also we have First Nation, Métis, and Inuit government. We have municipalities. There's so many, that are making things for us or wants to help. So your voice, we'll make sure that we bring your voice in your spirit. And I was honored, and I'm still honored to be in this circle with you. You can follow us, you can ask us questions until the end. We will make ourselves available. Technology now, huh? So if you have more, to share to us, I'm here. Somewhere in Canada, but I'll be there.
I went to the Sacred Fire last night to pray for today. And I was gifted by an elder, the turtle shell. I was gifted in Thunder Bay, my second day in, my golden eagle feather from the shores of Lake Superior. That's where I draw my strength from today.
Thank you. Women from this land have a gift also for you, eagle feathers that they prepared. And we have beautiful grandmothers who will come and give it to you. Merci.
There's a sweat afterward tonight at 8 o'clock.
Where?
OPEC. I requested a sweat.
Yeah, merci.
So that would conclude this matter, or we can adjourn this matter? Okay. Oh, I'll let them finish. Okay, Miigwech, we're gonna allow the elders to finish their work. It is we're gonna take a lunch break right now, and we're gonna come back at 1:30. There'll be another hearing here. Miigwech. Thank you. Merci.